Hello, my name is Mark Wheatley, and I'm the EUD Director. That's the European Union of the Deaf, and we're based in Brussels, Belgium, but we represent 30 countries in Europe, including Slovenia.
My name is Frida Planinc. I'm from Slovenia, and I represent the National Association of Deaf and Hard of Hearing in Slovenia as a president.
And tell me, when you work in your associations, I suppose you use sign language among yourselves, but what do you do when you work with associations of the hearing, or with the national authorities in Slovenia, in your case, and in the Brussels context, the Brussels political context in the case of the EUD?
We communicate with the political scene in Brussels through interpreters, and it depends on the situation as well. I am raised in England, and my first language is British Sign Language, and so therefore, if the situation is between me and one other person, then I will use a British Sign Language interpreter, so I can use my native mother tongue. However, if there are several people in the room, then I will use international signs. So it really depends on the context. The European Union of the Deaf, we do have staff interpreters, and that is essential to us to be able to link to the outside world. And then we also have outside interpreters, freelance interpreters that we use. People think if there's a conference, we can have just 2 interpreters. But perhaps there's also, outside of the sessions, you also need to network during the breaks, and so then we have to have more than just 2 interpreters. We have at least 4 or 5 interpreters so that we can be involved in both the sessions and the networking during the breaks.
With my work, of course, I always use Slovene Sign Language, and at the same time, when I need to also verbalize. To use the Slovene Sign Language, all the employees of the associations know sign language. So during my work at the association, we all use Slovene Sign Language. And in contacting with governments, ministry, different officials of the country, institutions, I always use sign language, and I have the interpreter there in helping me with the communication. I have the right to use sign language. I have the right to accept information in sign language. So the interpreter is the one that helps me with that communication.
And could you
when I use interpreter, there are no difficulties in expressing and receiving the information. So interpreter needs to be there for any kind of need.
Could you say something about training?
When you say you, what do you mean you?
Yeah. Well, we'll start with the Slovenian case. Could you say something about interpreter training in Slovenia? Since you say that Slovenian interpretation is a right, could you say something about how sign language interpreters are actually trained in Slovenia to provide those services for deaf people?
In Slovenia, at the moment, we have around, I think, 41 interpreters, certified interpreters. They, of course, are learning sign language through deaf clubs or schools, through the schools for the deaf, when they have certain courses for sign language. Of course, they need to. Then when they have enough knowledge of sign language, they need to do certain special schools for the sign language interpreters. They learn techniques from sign language to spoken word, from spoken word to sign language, culture, and of course the interpreter goes through certain schooling and so they are fluent in interpreting in both languages. It is very different how long this course is lasting, because the majority of the interpreters are children of deaf adults, and so their courses might last for a year. For others, may last longer. We have more and more hearing people that have no connection with deaf society, and sometimes they think it's so easy to learn sign language, but it takes much longer time for them to be confident in interpreting. All those who want to become interpreters, they have to have at least high school, but there's no official university training for interpreters. Interpreters, as I said, the minimum the education standard is the 5th level, or the high school, we say in Slovenia, and from there on they are interpreters if they fulfill that condition.
And could I ask you, Mark, about the European level of interpreter training? Are you working in the EUD for some sort of European certification or recognition across the European countries of qualifications for sign language interpreters?
The European Union of the Deaf works very closely with EFSLI, that is the European Forum of Sign Language Interpreters. And so, working closely with them, we are looking at, there are different associations of sign language interpreters throughout Europe, and there's no European sign language level, but every country has their own sign language certification process. International Sign itself, International Sign Interpreter needs to know different spoken languages and sign languages before they can even interpret in International Sign. So, but we're also now trying to work together with the European Commission and the European Parliament, the different European institutions, to rectify this situation, to make sure that there is equal footing with the spoken language interpreters.
What would you like to see happen in sign language interpreting that would make your day as president of the association in Slovenia? Is there something you think Europe should be doing for sign language interpreting?
Personally, let me just share my personal experience. We are surprised. Of course, we're happy that the European Commission invited sign language interpreters to be at this conference. Of course, we had to, how should I put this, ask for it, because Slovenia's partners, we are deaf, and we are the only deaf here at this conference. So I don't know if this commission would do it on their own, or they did it because we asked for it. But anyway, every European country has their own sign language, and they are partly of their own national language. They also have their own sign language, and of course they develop the way how they develop. It's the way how they develop the sign language. And of course, when we have the meetings at the EUD and World Federation of Deaf, we communicate in international signs. My wish at the moment is that on general meetings, general sessions, they should be allowed to have a national sign language and national interpreters sign language. Because even though not all of us are fluent in English, not all of deaf people are fluent in international signs, because they are based on, may say, maybe English language. So in European Parliament or in different meetings on the European level, I would like also not to pressure only the international sign, but also allow deaf people from the countries to use their sign language and also their interpreters using their sign language. Deaf people are invisible handicapped people. you notice us only when we raise our hands in communication. Otherwise, we look absolutely normal. And for that person, we are less recognized. And sign language is our language. This is the way our communication. This is our culture. This is our language. And if we want to keep our that identity, we have to keep our language. And of course, on some level, I want especially that national government would recognize national sign languages and also treat national sign languages as national languages in financing and in development the same.
And if I could ask you, Mark, what would you like to see happen for sign language, and what are you trying to work for as a result for the EUD?
I think the future of sign language in regards to the European Union of the Deaf, we actually just have established some guidelines along with EFSLI, the European Forum of Sign Language Interpretation, to see at an international European level what are the guidelines for using sign language and sign language interpreters. In the future, what I'd like to see is that there are sign language interpretation is, as I said, have equal rights and equal footing with spoken language interpreters. Even for sign language interpreters, they also need preparation materials. They need documentation ahead of time. It looks like sign language interpreters are sometimes treated as, the poor one in the family or the one-off, but so they need to be respected as full sign language interpreters and as professional interpreters. Once this happens, the European Union of the Deaf can also, we feel like we are constantly lobbying and fighting for the rights that we need sign language interpretation in different arenas. It would be nice to see that there is, with any conference budget, that there is also a budget for sign language interpretation, instead of us first having to ask for this ahead of time, fighting for this, and even in the DG of interpretation, it depends at the institutional levels, the different institutions, what they actually provide for in between different institutions.
If I may add one more thing that I just remembered is the European Commission, European Parliament, I think would be very important to have the sign language interpreter there. Look, every country has their own interpreters, their own official language. And deaf people have, and for deaf, and those languages are accessible to everybody, also to all disabled and all the hearing people, but not only to the deaf people. So deaf people at the same time are able to follow any discussion at the European level. That's why the sign language needs to be recognized as a language.
Thank you very much.